Simon Brundish, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Finally, you're here. We've been trying to make this happen for quite some time. I have a lot to talk to you today about, but first, before we get into the topics, let's discuss your coaching journey and who you're working with currently.
That is a long, long podcast in itself. I'm old, so I've been doing this for 27 years. When I first started as an S&C, there was no such thing as S&C. I was just a fitness guy, and I've probably had about 40 different job titles, worked with lots of different clubs, lots of different types of athlete, been through the whole professional, amateur gamut of sports. I've worked in football, rugby, cricket, athletics, swimming, ballet, even all of that stuff, and probably aligning with my children coming along and their maturation through puberty has been my journey in focusing my mind and the things I enjoy most with kids their age. And I shied away from working at elite level with the professional grown-ups, which has largely for my life been adult men, because they're the ones that got paid until 5 years ago. That I've discovered that I prefer to work with developing athletes or children, as we might say. So I have a program that works with 5-year-olds right around the world. We've got 650,000 kids that do that program, Strength Lab Superheroes. And I work in and around schools, clubs with that foundation to up to the professional development phase, how we call it in England, like teenagers. And I currently work with, given this is a football podcast, with Derby County Women.
Awesome. So I do have a lot of questions in regards to your youth development work and what you're doing in terms of training. But before we get to that, I always like to give my guests a chance to explain their tweets because on Twitter, there's not a lot of nuance and people just react so quickly. But I do want you to discuss this one. So this was from actually last week, and I just retweeted it because I loved it. So you said we buy into the tech, into the science like it solves everything, as though measuring Nordics every morning or asymmetries of eccentric landing solves hamstring injuries. Does it? Do they? Do we know anything as an absolute?
So I have this conversation regularly with the other old dudes that still survive in S&C and sports science. The older I get, the more I believe the less I know, basically. And I see kids coming through in professional football, particularly, and rugby, and they are very, very smart. Probably a totally different demographic than came into sports science 25 years ago. And they love gadgets and they are sold incessantly the greatest tech you can find. It's relatively cheap now compared to what we spent on speed gates 10 years ago even. But the GPS, the force plates, movement sensors of all varieties, and you have these kids now creating, kids I say, this is under 25 because I'm old, that are creating a huge database of data, of testing, without necessarily having an outcome in mind. And I feel like we're tracking every movement and every step. We have at the club with the boys, the GPS down to 7. And they're tracking these kids in every training match and every training drill they do. And I'm not sure what the purpose of it is, other than to employ somebody to collate the data. I feel like sports science in itself, and there's a certain generation of sports scientists now that have refined a set process even look at the periodization model. Everybody's football periodization model is the same. Match day plus one, they do this. Match day, yeah, as they go. Like it's the perfect model because it's been refined this way. Yet hamstring injuries are the highest rate they've ever been. Not just so, yeah, I understand that high intensity running has gone up at the same time. So are we making better athletes? Is it the sports science that's enabling better athletes? Are coaches just demanding more high speed running because of the tactical nuances they understand now better? Because quite probably data analysis, and they have like incredible high tech. Like Liverpool have nuclear physicists that run their and astrophysicists that run their tech departments, looking at swarm data of the GPS of how players move in this area, then what happens to the ball, and blah, blah, blah. So they can refine that if they do this at this speed, this stuff happens. So maybe that correlates into more high speed running, but we're getting more injuries. So we're testing for asymmetry, saying that within 15% you're likely to cause an injury, but we're getting everybody to have to tick boxes on these beautiful tests that we've created and that the sports science academics, the pracademics, have created as best practice, yet injuries at the highest level they've ever been. So how do we know we're right?
That's so true. I feel with the periodization model, no one's really thought to question it, and everyone's just been using this universal template, like 2 days, 3 days out from a game, and it's just interesting that the more technology we've added in, the more people on staff. I mean, we have a physio, we have a sports scientist, we have a director of performance, yet injuries are going up. And I do want your thoughts on the women's game in the past few years on the ACL injuries because when all those happened, I mean, everyone got really triggered online and they're like, we need like resources, we need more stuff for the women's game. And I can see why people are making that argument, but at the highest level, don't they have access to the GPS, the NOR boards, the technology? So is it a lack of resources or what is the problem?
My feeling, I don't know how this runs in America, but over my career, the longer you've been in S&C, I'm sure you start to create a developer coach's eye. So I'm walking down the street and my brain is just constantly looking at people as I see, looking at their walking and their jogging gaits, and my brain filters yeah, they've got a hip impingement or they've had a rotator cuff injury. It's how it works all the time, right? So this is a long-winded version of how I'm going to get to the story. I can mostly spot a particularly female American footballer compared to if we had a big international tournament. I'm fairly positive I could point out the American girl footballers and the English girl footballers. Those things are getting more similar over time because you have had probably 20 years better history of S&C in sports, in college sports. So your girls, they're all jacked. They have massive quads, but they also have massive glutes and hammies. Ours don't in England. They don't have any glutes and hammies. I think you could probably categorize with that nice stereotype of the English people with the bad white teeth. We have the same physical version with the skinny white girl with a flat ass. And you've got the big athletic looking American girls that are doing it. So my guess is that your girls are more robust to these things already because they already have this big, long training history. In England, they have very, very small training history, even at the elite level, which actually only involves 6 teams in the whole country that have access to what we have just argued about, whether it's right or wrong, the good tech and the good support. Even below their highest level, we played against a team this week. Derby County played against their reserves this week of a WSL team. I won't call them out, but the WSL team they have I think they have 6 full-time S&Cs. They have 2 full-time physios. They have a doctor. They have all of GPS. They have NOR boards, all that stuff. The WS girls. The team below, their reserves, which are ostensibly to under 21, so probably 16 to 21-year-old girls. Mostly don't even get to 21. But those girls are part-time, so they'll train 3 times a week. They, for the first year, this is the first year they've ever had a full-time S&C, they have a part-time physio. And they don't have access to a gym. They train at 8 o'clock at night once the boys, 6-year-old boys are off the pitch. They have no access to the changing rooms. They fit in their game time around the men's club whenever they can give them access, and very often they play on a local school pitch because they don't have access. They don't have the same access to fields that at the training ground or an actual football ground that the boys' clubs do. So, and that's the highest level of academy football. So even if we only look, as you say, at the highest level, anything below the first team, so the kids entering the first team, they've had very, very small training history. And so if they get injured at any point, they've got some student sports therapist that is their physio, that is diagnosing them. If they tear an ACL, they have to go on the NHS, our health system, and wait for it to get fixed. Could be 6, could be 8 months before they get surgery, and they'll have to go to a physio once a week to get rehab. It's very, very different from how we see in the men's game. So they don't get the support treatment at all anywhere below the top 6 teams, and only their teams, not the whole club. But if you get away from that, they have nothing. It's just students, student S&Cs, student sports therapists. They have no money at all. So they have no training history. There's no way for them to train, and they have zero support staff at any level. On top of that, you look at those girls that are part-time, while I'm rambling, they have jobs. They're at college. Yesterday we had our 4 best players couldn't play in a high profile friendly against the WSL team because one hurt her back in her job at stacking shelves in a supermarket. One was away at university playing for Loughborough first team in Scotland, so she couldn't play. And 2 of them had already played for uni that day and then played for us at night because that's the constraints that we face. So it's suboptimal environment for girls' games. So they're always playing malnourished, undertrained, or undertrained historically from a strength perspective, and overtrained from a fatigue perspective.
Fatigue is the next thing I wanted to touch on because not a lot of people are talking about this or outraged in terms of the injuries. So, another tweet you had was playing the most games possible in a season causes fatigue. Fatigue causes hamstring injuries. Who knew? And I'm sure we can say the same about other injuries like ACL and ankle sprains and all that. But in terms of the women's schedule, what are your thoughts on that? Are we going to change course anytime soon? Do we have to?
I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to throw back at you from a female's perspective because if we compare men and women and we're in that weird world, I think we're over the hump of the weird world where we're saying everybody's the same and we have to be all treated exactly the same and you're not treating individuals. But the top international men, they're playing 5,000 to 5,500 minutes a season. And the top international women this year will have played just over 3,000. Is physiologically are women less able? Are they only 60% of men? Is it the actual game time that's the problem? Given that they're covering about between 20 and 30% less distance in the high speed distance, and the velocity of of that speed is lower as well. Like, are the physiological demands beyond girls? That would be a question I'd aim at you.
I definitely see what you're saying, and I've wrestled with this a lot. And I actually got a course from Emma Hayes and Raymond Verheyen where they talked about this issue, and it really changed my perspective on it and how a female body might not be able to handle the amount of load that a male body is handling and all the games and training sessions that they're undergoing. And that is something we should consider and research more. And I don't want all the females listening to think that, it makes you any less than. It just is what it is. And it's really just looking out for the health of our girls. But yeah, it's something I'm just trying to research more and understand. And I definitely get what you're saying. And I don't think a lot of people are considering the female physiology and load management.
It's different. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying. It's different. So in the same way that you have 10 different kids show up to your gym to your training session, you treat them all individually and you assess them individually and you prescribe and program for them individually. They all have individual targets, they all have individual periodization that you'll get better at programming over time as you get to know them. That is how we should be dealing with women rather than saying better or worse than men. We need to step aside from this. Men's football is a different sport to women's football. If we accept those two things, and instead of looking at the men's periodization models, we should be going, what? How does this? How does the physiology of this girl adapt to the stresses that are unique to them? That's all. And they should be creating our own periodization model for these girls. I just one extra thing I wanted to ask you about is that if this is an impossible discussion, I think it's right. I think most scientists would argue that the validity of it, and I understand in this world it would never happen. Men are about 30% bigger than women. We play on the same size pitch with the same size goals. The constant stereotypical ridiculing of female goalkeepers, my feeling is that it has been for across time, female goalkeepers aren't necessarily the best version of female footballers. I think that's got a lot better recently. You're seeing way more athletic keepers. But if the ball is in the corner, it's going in. And in men's football, it's not the same. But men have 30% less to go, less distance to go. My feeling would be either reduce the goal size by 30%, so it's actually relative to the female body, or we actually increase the goal size by 30% for men, which I think is probably more possible because women don't want to feel less than. But increase the goal size for men, and then we can laugh at them because they can't get to shots that are in the corner. But it also works with distances around the pitch. It's the same distance, and women are smaller. So if you look at the physical demands of a game in terms of the number of accelerations and decelerations or the high speed distance that each men and women travel, it looks different in numbers, and it should do because there is more space in girls' football just by the nature that they're smaller. They also kick the ball less hard, less far.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think because I think a lot of performance coaches would make the argument, let's not change the women's game, but let's just prepare them for that stress better than we are.
Can we?
But
That's the thing. That's saying that these are the demands that are set by men's football. Is it possible? So what we're doing by this is going right. 100 meters, the best time. The winners of the 100 meters can run 100 meters in 9.68. That's what we have to prepare these girls for. Well, the girls are always going to lose,
right.
and in all likelihood, if we train them for that, they're just going to break.
This is a great discussion because people find it really hard to step away from this idea that girls might be weaker, and that's what we're saying here. But no, you have to really use discernment and realize it's different, like you said. And I think this is especially important to discuss for the female athletes who are going through puberty. And I don't know what it's like where you are, but in the States we have 12 to 14-year-old girls playing 4 to 5 tournament games in a weekend. Sometimes they're on, like, their school soccer team and club soccer team in the same season, so they're really playing, like, 6, 7 days a week, and for that growing female body, I don't know if this is so good.
I couldn't agree more. We Yeah, it's I don't think it's good for boys football, but we now have the academy system in England where we have this thing called the EPPP, which um, they try to set standards, scientific standards, of which they have to hit. So they record all movement of all kids, from training load, playing load, and then it goes back to a central database, which is governed by the FA, basically. And it holds them to a set standard, so that there are high level practitioners applying things like growth and maturation status. They're monitoring growth and maturation status. We're looking at injury occurrences at specific ages, at specific loads for against growth and maturation status of these boys. There is nothing like it for the girls. So we're applying, again, knowledge that we have of boys, of male science, against girls, and I think it's very, very different. The elite end of girls sport are they even considering growth and maturation status for a start, and it's a very small amount. The in England, most what we call grassroots, which are just parents coaching games, but that they might be affiliated to a club that you will have heard of, but it's still mostly level one parent coaches, might be level two parent coaches, but these aren't professionals run by professional clubs. They're just affiliated to professional clubs, and the men's club pretends they have a girls team. That's mostly how it works in England. And so they don't have any understanding of the physiology of teenage girls. They just play more and more and more and more. And it's hard to get away from the fact that the average 16-year-old academy boy has played about 6,500 to 8,000 hours of football. And the average 16-year-old girl has played between 1,600 and 2,000 hours of football. So everybody is aware it's so much less, and they need to play more to increase their experiential learning and all of the good stuff. But you can't do it all at the same time. We need to find a better way to expose them to maybe not even games. They definitely need to play games, but we need to find a way that they will go and play on the playground with their mates, which is how most learning occurs from a technical skill perspective. And I don't know how we do that, because society sets rules. Like you go to high school, you don't go to high school, you've been to high school, and cool girls do this, nerdy girls do this. And in England, it's not cool to be playing sports, sadly.
Now, I do want you to explain further why during that female athlete growth spurt, it's not great to be playing all these games. What's kind of going on during this time in terms of like bone development, muscles, hormones that we need to look out for?
So if you've either lived it yourself, or you've had a daughter, or you've got a girl in your family, you'll know that it's very common for an adolescent. It usually happens earlier in girls than in boys. The adolescent growth spurt. So they will very often have a growth spurt between. In England, it's getting more and more common. Like 11 and 12-year-old girls, suddenly they're bigger than the boys. But during that phase, there's so much crazy stuff going on inside their body. The emotional stuff is just insane. I can't understand. I just can see that it's happening. There'll be lots of stuff going psychologically and sociologically with confidence and stuff, but physiologically with their bones, they first their feet grow, so suddenly their toes, for their brain, in simplistic terms, their toes aren't where they used to be. So it will look and feel different when they go to kick a ball. Then their long bones grow, and then their feet are so much further away from their body where they used to be. So you'll see them, the shapes that they make when they're if they're doing any kind of training like squatting or lunging, it looks different. Their jumping and landing will look different. How they kick a ball will look different, and how they run will look different. So during these phases, their coordination is off. I'm not sure it's actually their coordination that's broken. It's that the executive programs that their brain has coordinated over the years no longer is accurate, because when they go to swing their hand to hit a ball, their hand is 3 inches further away from the body than it used to be. So it's just different. So they have to relearn that how to create shapes and how to coordinate their hand and their feet with their brain. This leaves them really susceptible to injury and to joint injuries in particular in their ankles, their shins, their knees, and very often in their backs. And what we're starting to see is in the second growth spurt, so they'll have a slightly smaller growth spurt at 14 or 15, that girls have been sat, not just girls, but teenagers, are sat around so much, they're starting to get postural problems. So they're starting to get shoulder and neck issues because of being sat around and like fixing into that curved position. So you're getting the postural as well as the growth issues in those circumstances.
I want you to talk about what happens in those younger years before the growth spurt now and why those years are so critical for proper youth athletic development and just get into some of the things that you've done with your kids in the past.
Yeah, that's so. This is my wheelhouse, really. That get below the pubescent years, where girls are equal to boys physically and physiologically, and even they can be big. If you get them at that 10 to 11 year old age, they're very often a little bit bigger and can be a little bit stronger. So you have the advantage of them being able to compete equally, which is a wonderful thing. If you get a whole class of boys and girls that compete on an even basis, it's much easier to get a buy-in and enjoyment of whatever that physical activity or the sport you're playing is. And boy, do girls enjoy beating boys. And it's a wonderful thing because they know at some point in their lives they're not going to be able to do it, but that is the time where they can. So you can nurture that confidence in that time. But physically, from what I'm finding in teenage boys, if they're working on their gross motor patterns and then their fundamental movements, their squat, hinge, press, pull, push, hanging, all of the good stuff, the rotation stuff, if they're mastering their body before they've had a growth spurt, they can really refine that skill set. They also have the good stuff flying in their body as they start to grow, where they can lay a muscle in the right place at the right time onto those bones. And it's almost like you're giving them, they get in Hollywood steroids at this point. If they've got the refined, well practiced coordination skills, and you're loading them, then they can really grow, and it fits their athletic body it creates the athletic body for the rest of their lives.
So I do want to talk to you about just early specialization and just how the youth academies are set up over there. But there's a lot of academies now. It's a full time job for a lot of these kids, and their solution to that is okay, well, within soccer practice, we are going to incorporate some of these like other sports and movements so that it kind of counts as them playing another sport. What are your thoughts on that? I do see the reasoning, but I just want to hear what you have to say about that one.
I think in England we have 92 professional football teams, professional football clubs. I think we have 28 Category 1. So you have category tiers for they have to prove competence. They have all of these different factors they have to show that they have access to the right amount of gym time. They do multi-sports. And part of the last 5 years is it's one of those things that's very, very well intentioned when it comes from top down, that they have to have multi-sports, because everybody that is driving youth development is aware that early specialization is terrible. Problem is, football clubs recruit at 5. They're getting kids in at 5. They're not allowed to be in an academy till they're 12. So they have a fake academy they just give it a different name. And they give the kids all of their kit. They sign them up to not deals, but they're still signed. They think they're going to be professional footballers. They live like professional footballers. Their parents think they're going to be professional footballers, so that the club doesn't miss out on having one potential talent at 16. So they capture 1,000 and attach them to the club in any way possible. And that goes against the rules that get them in the EPPP. So they have to create these little buckets for them outside of the academy, but they really all think they're part of the academy. And to qualify for the highest categories, they have to provide multi-sport. They have to they have to demonstrate as a club that they encourage the kids to play other sports. But the kids can't play other sports because they have to be at that football club every single day of the week, at least four for training, and then going to be matches. So they can't also play rugby because there's no time for them to join a rugby team. They might be able to practice once a week for their rugby or cricket team, but they can't play at the weekend because the football club dominate their weekends. So what team is going to allow them to come and practice with them with no prospect of that good kid? Because the kid is going to be athletic and good. He's going to be one of the better kids in their team. They can't play at the weekend with their mates. There's so much less fun in it for a kid to just practice without actually having the competition of playing hockey or rugby with their friends, because they're prevented to by the club. But they're also dangled the fact that they're going to be professional footballers. So that's a huge part of their identity. I think you're probably going to get 20 of the 92 clubs in the country that have the right intention of, we genuinely believe in multi-sport, and they will get a yoga instructor in once a week, or a volleyball teacher in once a week, or something like that, and they'll do one 40-minute session in a 3 hours on a Monday where it's multi-sport. And for 2 hours and 20 minutes of the time on Monday, they're also going to just be playing football, practicing the exact same skills and exact same movement patterns over and over and over again. So it's lip service, it's box ticking. That's what they do in football, and it should be banned. They should adhere to the rules of no academy football before 12. And on top of that, they should add a layer of they shouldn't be allowed to be attached to a football club for more than 2 days a week. And then they will go and play other sports because they can.
It's very similar here in the States too. They're calling those younger age, like, travel academy teams, like, pre-ECNL, and just kind of, like, rebranding it.
Yeah, it's so
And
expensive there as well.
it is, but then, of course, like, the kids, they get the really nice kit, they might get, like, a photo shoot and, like, an Instagram post, so it's very, flashy, to the parents, very captivating to
There'll be an
everyone.
Instagram signing session as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen that for as young as, like, age 8 or 9, and it's like these kids are just growing up too fast, and, of course, like, there's physical repercussions and potentially overuse and injuries that manifest later on, but it's also the mental and emotional component that I'm more concerned about, and I don't think enough people are talking about that side of specialization, and how kids need that time during childhood to play, experiment, develop emotional intelligence, learn problem solving, be creative. Like, I'm more pumped up about that, but not many people are discussing that side of it, unfortunately.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important that kids. It's how I conduct my S&C sessions to young kids. We don't call them S&C, obviously, but I'll constrain games so that the fat kid gets the win, because they need to succeed as well. They need to. So we need to create games and scenarios where everybody in the room succeeds at some point, but not succeeds in the way that parents like to. Well done, you breathed today. Congratulations, you're a genius. In the way that they know they succeeded, because that's where innate confidence comes from. So as good coaches, you need to create an environment that challenges the kids, but also that challenges each of the kids in a way that at some point that kid can win at that one thing. So it's probably nudging a quality that one kid in the class is going to be strong but really slow. So stop having races all the time. Sometimes you have to have a challenge that is around some kind of dynamic stability, or that's utilizing their mass, and they get to win. And then maybe if they win, they can challenge. They will see the joy in that sport that you're playing, and then they will, or maybe they'll discover another sport that they're good at because of that one athletic skill that they have the ability at. And conversely, the football kid needs to lose, needs to not be the best kid in class, because that's what happens in England. It's always the football boys that they dominate PE in England, and they're always the fastest, the highest jumping, and the ones with the biggest mouth that dominate the PE class. And there's a set hierarchy, a set structure that sociologically in that class everybody knows, and that's not good for that kid's development, because as they accelerate from an 8-year-old that's the best in their class, as they accelerate, if they're actually good at football, when they're 15 and they suddenly get moved up to a county team or to a regional team or to a professional team where they're not the best, they don't know, they don't have the tools to cope with that. They don't understand how does that work. So they need to suffer. Yeah, they need to be challenged. There needs to be jeopardy. They need to have some kind of fear of not being good at this thing, and figuring a way to overcome it. And good coaches should be able to create scenarios that can help challenge those things, so the kids can develop that toolbox.
I love that, and I've definitely seen that before when you have, like, your best young ones who can juggle the ball 1,000 times and who are the best on the field, but then as soon as you put them in a game of tag or dodgeball or, roughhousing, they lose and their world is shattered, and they're like, "Wait a minute, what? Like, I can't do this?" And it's like, "No, that's good. You need that because it's gonna set you up for later in life to be able to handle that when things, like, get even harder for you in your main sport." So, I appreciate you touching on that. Now, I do want you to share, like, some of the games that you do with the young ones, so, like, the coaches listening or even the parents listening can start to implement some of this.
So even with the earliest point, I don't know if you guys have netball in America.
Some of us play it, some of us are cool.
There you go. So I believe it should be like the earliest game taught in schools, because the skills required, it's not football, but the skills required are the broadest toolbox that they can learn and nurture. So there's catching, there's throwing, there's all different types of ball manipulation going on here, but spatially and how players interact on a court, it's usage of the court, and then usage of the court amongst each other, amongst different players. There's acceleration, decelerations. There is they have to constantly quantify angles and how to stop start in different directions. It's how we sell our superheroes program is the times table of movement. So they have to learn all of the alphabet before the alphabet of movement, and then you can start to piece those letters together into words, and words are movement drills, and then gradually into some kind of sentences, and write a story. The story is sport, and if you can refine that back to the sentences, which is a broken down version of the sport, which is what we use netball for, we can do it with football as well. You can constrain the size of the court or the pitch or the area, and also the goals. So in netball, you have to get it through a hoop, get the ball through a hoop, but you don't need that. You could just have one of the kids' chair ball standing in the corner of the room on a chair, and they have to catch it because they're developing the catching. And then quickly, how we develop it is gamify it. Is the good football boy? They only get 1 point if they score, and the bad kid, the one that's not played sport before, say they get 5 points. But the good football boy, he can get 3 points if he scores after 3 passes. So it starts to make that boy or the good girl have to start incorporating other team members in that before you're trying to nurture that the different way of thinking for them, instead of them just being able to use their athleticism. They suddenly have to use the actual game rules and the different skills involved in the game that we have. So it's really simple to it works similar to old NBA PlayStation games where somebody's hot and there's a big fireball going around. If there's a thunderball, for 20 seconds, like Powerball in ice hockey, if you can get it into one of these 2 extra areas on the court, then they get 10 points. And sometimes they can take one of the other players out for 30 seconds, and they can pick which one of those players it is. So that removes the good player, and suddenly you've got the 2 equalized teams that get to play for a second. Yeah, it's very simple. It's just constraining the specific games with an idea in mind to develop certain qualities of tactics or skill.
It's so interesting because as you were talking there, like from the outside looking in from one of these games, a lot of people be like, "Oh, that's just like a fun game." But you explaining all this, there's so much thought behind it. And I love that. And I want people to recognize it. Like there's an intention behind all this and transferring over to soccer. And I want you to just explain further, why do soccer players need to learn how to catch? Because
Well,
people are gonna be like, why are they doing this?
so soccer players need to learn how to catch because they shouldn't just be developing the same movement patterns over and over again because they'll get injured for a start. But they everybody needs better hand-eye coordination. Hand-eye coordination also transfers to hand-foot coordination. You need to be able to control your body all in all directions at all speeds at all amplitudes. So more control of your body is always better. That's the bottom line. It's not so. I would even have. We have games of Battleship where we have. I don't have any in here. Nerf howlers. You know, like they look like missiles. Yeah, and so it works a little bit like because we don't have American football here, but it's a little bit like quarterbacks throwing, and they have to get certain areas of land that the throw into certain areas, and they can only throw from certain areas of the pitch. So it makes them run in set directions. So we can set it up so we're working on their lateral movement. They can only move sideways. They have to catch and then move sideways before they can throw it to somebody on the other and work their way up a court that way. You've got to look at what is the movement challenge that you want to solve, and then reverse engineer that into a game, and preferably into a game that they already know. You can just constrain it to so the outcome is the thing that you're trying to develop. If people looked at my very often parents look at my Instagram of like football drills, and it makes no sense because my girls, they're just mostly laughing and chasing each other, but there are specific physiological qualities we're trying to develop, and we're trying to challenge through that. And if you can do that while they're laughing, you get more buy-in. They're going to try harder.
Yeah, fun's a big one. Fun, smiles, and laughter. Those are the best KPIs for the young ones.
Yeah, for
And
sure, for sure.
if you can give these kids a great workout where they're out of breath and smiling, and they get in the car on the way home and they're like, man, I want to see Coach Simon again. That's a great sign. You don't need these robotic mechanics like overcoached drills at these ages. And I'd argue even the older ages as well.
Definitely, you don't need them ever.
But,
That's
yeah, I'm sure we could do a whole, like, 3-hour Joe Rogan on this, but, just to wrap this up today, I mean, we've talked about a lot, how too much science can be bad science at times, what's going on with all these injuries, how we develop youth. What are some of your closing thoughts on just making sure our soccer players stay as robust as possible, during their younger years and then through the rest of their career?
I think if we can create, if you, I'm not entirely sure of the cohort that listen to the pod, but if I'm guessing if there are parents but also young coaches in there, if you can get a basic understanding of movement principles, of strength and conditioning principles, and if you can use that as a language to communicate with the technical coaches so that we can instill my the easiest way of improving everybody is instilling a 15-minute warm-up that covers all of the movement qualities you're trying to develop, that you feel are the golden threads of physiological success in athleticism in a footballer. So however that is, if you can figure out, say I have 128, but if you have 20, if you can figure 24 movements that you think will develop the right athletic qualities of an all-rounded child athlete by the time they're 16, if you can embed those into a little toolbox that you can deliver, but also that you can share with all of the technical coaches at your club, you'll have phenomenal child athletes by the time they're 18.
Brilliant. Well, this was great, Simon, and I'm sure my listeners will find this incredibly helpful. So, with that said, I'm going to keep your social media links and everything in the caption below. So, please give Simon a follow and reach out. He gets back to you right away, and he's open door policy, I think, even though he's really busy. But he's always happy to help and just super passionate about youth development. So, Simon, thanks again, and I will see everyone on the next episode.